Thank you so much. I'm excited to be talking to wildlife people. I've alternated between biology departments and wildlife departments. And so I really like the more applied approach to my science and working with a diversity of landowners, partnerships. And so I want to start today by just giving a brief introduction about myself, what I do here, how we might all be able to connect and address the emerging issues that we're facing in the Trans-Pecos and how it relates to water. And then give an overview of kind of what our new Meadows Research Institute for West Texas Water, some of our core research, applied research goals are, and how we hope to function and serve our community. So I'm definitely passionate about water in the desert. Specifically, you could call me a West Texas fish counter. So I hope by the end of this talk, I can convince you that I earned that title, as well as hopefully now a West Texan. I've been here for several years, but I've done research out here for 18. So I'm really excited to be integrating into the community and to be talking with you all, especially from a water approach. So one thing I've learned across working in the Trans-Pecos is that everything we care about, our communities, wildlife, ranching, our personal and community health and well-being, they're all really tied to water, right? We cannot exist here without water. And so that's really both the foundation of my research and also the Meadows Research Institute for West Texas Water. So water doesn't exist in isolated places, right? Even if you see a little spring, it's connected somehow. So we have all types of connections happening. And really, the water can express or give us insights into what might be happening, right? It can give us a measure of resilience or how long that water might last. One good example was the Comanche Springs, right, in Fort Stockton. I use that example a lot with my students to teach about what happens when we lose water or springs, right? And it's a significant impact, and it's very scary to see. And so the main goal is to look at our freshwater ecosystems and hopefully provide the most resilient future and make the best choices in preserving these natural resources. So when one part changes of these systems, whether from drought or groundwater pumping, even invasive species, because we can talk about water quality, which is the actual chemical or physical composure of the water and how close it is to being something suitable for making a suitable habitat for humans and other species that might rely on that, as well as water quantity, the overall amount of water, right? So we can approach that from two different angles. And so my research kind of bounces between both of those. So as an ecologist, I study living organisms and how they interact with the environment, but other members of my team are geologists, and we're very interdisciplinary in the approach to talking about some of these issues. So in the desert, we have all types of aquatic ecosystems. So we have springs like Balmorhea, Diamond Y over in Fort Stockton. Really, this area of the Trans-Pecos historically was probably dotted with even many more wetlands, right? Some of them we've housed up, some of them are on private land and have been understudied, or we're still not sure how those connect. And so part of my research and the research of the center is to understand how these are all connected, right? And to ensure that we're being the best stewards and we understand the amount of water that we have, right? Which is kind of the goal number one, which you will see kind of as a core theme in a few of our research projects is how much water are we working with, right? We cannot protect or preserve if we don't understand the water amount or the water quality and quantity that we have to work with and manage. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I think this kind of describes work in the Trans-Pecos, especially when working with surface waters or water in the desert, which to a lot of people who don't exist out here think it sounds like an oxymoron, right? That's really hard to explain to people that you study fish in the desert. But we do have them here, and they're spectacular and really quirky and fun, and they're also representative of kind of how we are as a community, resilient, and they've been here for a while, and they can survive for the most part, right? But no river in Texas is wilder or more contrary than the Pecos. A lot of these systems don't follow the typical rules that we see across other types of ecosystems, which both makes my research fascinating, fun, but also sometimes takes me off on undiscovered, areas where there might not be a lot of information to look towards for answers. So what's so spectacular about water in the desert, and what are our pressing issues? Well, precipitation is low, so generally, naturally, right? It's been unpredictable. We see that increasing. Evaporation often exceeds rainfall. That's how most of our, systems, they're losing to evaporation. Sometimes surface waters are rare and intermittent, right? Sometimes we have little glimpses of water. And so measuring even those instances of pockets of water is still important to looking at the overall quality and quantity that we have to work with. But small changes, so small things can happen, and then the results of that are big ecological consequences, such as local species or native taxa going completely extinct from the planet, because you can only find them here in one spring, right? So we completely wipe off a role that has existed. So what are we studying? What are some of the kind of research areas? Spring ecosystems. So like I mentioned, San Solomon Springs is a really great example of this, because many of us get to interact with that, right? Like, so it both holds a cultural significance, but also ecological significance for many of us out here in West Texas. River connectivity. So I have studied historically along the Pecos and the Rio, right? And so how are these rivers connected? How are these populations connected? What happens whenever we have a disjointed system as such as the Rio, which passes through both New Mexico into Texas, and then it also flows into the Rio Grande, right? So we're dealing with two different transboundaries as well. So how do we study and approach a system that flows over those different types of governance and also landscapes? Wildlife habitat, right? Like aquatic landscapes are foundational for most of our wildlife habitats. And so bridging that connection between wildlife and people who study aquatic sciences, I think it is really great and important. And I'm looking forward to building that out here. A lot of times you will see that separated, right? And I think the core theme of my research is that we're all connected, and it takes an interdisciplinary approach to address these issues. Restoration. What can we do with what we got, right? How can we make the best use of that? So working with landowners and partners to restore and making our working lands. So like I said, I'm kind of interested in this broader theme of global change, which happens across all types of ecosystems. A lot of scientists approach it. I specifically just like to put that lens across a desert landscape. So I'm looking at water quality and quantity as well as species interactions. And really that's telling us historically, how has the water been, right? We can use certain species to address how long has this system been here? When was it last connected to a bigger river basin, right? So we can ask a lot of historical questions about the conditions of this area if we're looking towards mitigating it to those levels. So looking at some of our research in action, like I said, our team is composed of biologists, ecologists, and then also 2 geologists, and we now have a water economist on board. So we're kind of taking a multifaceted approach to some of these emerging issues. So relevant to this area specifically is groundwater pumping, reduced spring flows. We've seen some local spring heads go dry. Can we predict when that's going to happen? We have formed the San Solomon Springs Collaborative, which is a group of both landowners, scientists, and community members to try to preserve the spring flow in those springs, understand where it's coming from, what's recharging it, and what can we do to ensure that we continue to see water flowing. Irrigation return flows from agriculture, drought, right? Produce water inputs, which is another emerging issue. And I'll add in even data centers, right? What are we looking at in terms of data centers? What does that mean for water usage? A lot of these emerging issues we have recently covered in our Water in the Desert conference. And so through the Meadows Research Institute for West Texas Water, we're looking at kind of connecting these 3 things. Groundwater, how that applies and how that is seen, again, in surface waters, normally through springs, and looking at applied solutions. So working with multiple partnerships to address real emerging issues and coming up with actual tools for our community. So within our Meadows Research Institute, we have several areas that we're investing in, applied research, as well as collaborative research, landowner partnerships. We're looking at training the next generation of water scientists who can go out, staff our groundwater districts, answer, add to these questions in the future. Really learn about what it means to have water in the desert and how to manage and be a good steward of that. Outreach. So we recently just had a rainwater garden workshop. So during monsoon season, how can we make keep water on the surface longer for as long as we can? And then also decision support. When we have issues come up, how can we serve as a research institute, how can we serve our community and be that body of knowledge? So I'm just going to briefly go through some of my future research, my past research, and what I'm looking to expand. So like I said, I've worked historically along the Pecos River. So I deal a lot with water quality issues such as salt accumulation, and what we can do from here as the river becomes saltier. How can we best use perhaps produced water and in a nice way to offset some of those invasive species work, right? What does this mean when they're there? What does that tell us about the future of the system and the ecological services that it's providing us? How does this function and compare to other rivers across both other arid lands, but also just other river networks systems? But the core message is really resilience requires that integral approach of both restoring flow and the water quality and water quantity conditions. So these are just some themes. And then I wanted to end with the real goal is to co-produce knowledge with other stakeholders and our partnerships so that we're all investing in the same thing, which is to exist out here and to tackle this bigger picture. So we hope I hope specifically to establish a generalizable model of arid freshwater systems and how to best, predict future conditions and offset that in terms of resilience. And so with that, I would be happy to ask or answer any questions if we have time. We do. So I'm actually not let me think on that, and I might catch you later. That's an excellent question. So the question was, how are current reservoirs of water being best managed for potential wildfire? That's a really great overlap of wildlife. And based on some of the city planning and information I know for this, at least the municipality, I'm not sure that I've come across that in any of our water planning. But yes, catch me later and I'll think on that.